walk with me as we wander down the crowded street. Even if we're shuffling our feet, you make me never wanna miss a beat, never miss a beat. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, nowhere else I wanna go. And if you lie with me under the sycamore tree, whether we're high or low, nowhere else I wanna go. So walk with me, walk with me.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting for City of Cedar Falls. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Schultz,
Here.
Latta,
Here.
Cruz,
Here.
Hallbaker,
Here.
Ganfield,
Present.
Chrisman,
Here.
Dunn,
Here.
all members present.
Madam Clerk, item number 1, move to traffic management policy. We have a presentation from David Wicke and Matt Tolan. Thank you, guys.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Council. Tonight's presentation will be to go over our standard operating procedure for traffic management. Every year we receive calls and requests for different types of wide array of traffic-related concerns, you know, whether they're like a no parking request or a stop sign or yield request, speed reduction, no parking, speed limits, and also pedestrian improvement type concerns. So the development of our standard operating procedure really kind of formalizes and standardizes the process that we use to review all these types of requests that we get in, and you know, how we want to address those types of concerns. You know, some of this is, you know, we've done in large part, we've done kind of this sort of thing all along throughout the years. This is just a document to kind of just formalize that process that we do. When we were creating the standard operating procedure, we kind of looked towards other communities, see the kind of things that they were implemented, and we took elements from various communities and kind of custom tailored to what we felt fit with our city. So with that, we'll kind of jump into this. All right, so what is traffic management? It is the process of studying, planning, and redirecting the movement of vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, and other active means to ensure smooth, safe, and efficient transportation in the community. This procedure solidifies existing practices and services as an integral guiding document for addressing traffic-related concerns. As our community continues to grow, the challenges of traffic management become more complex, requiring comprehensive strategies to address safety. So we have a three-phase strategic approach to traffic management. The first is being education, which raises the awareness of traffic-related safety concerns and encourages the community involvement in traffic management efforts. Next would be the enforcement, and that's to foster commitment to speed limits and traffic regulations through various tactics implemented by the Cedar Falls Public Safety Department. And finally, engineering, where we evaluate affected streets with data-driven approach to help determine that engineering solutions are both appropriate and effective. So what we've developed is an internal traffic management committee, and the traffic committee will administer and maintain the standard operating procedures for traffic management in the city. It's really comprised of 3 departments and 5 city divisions to provide a unified review and response to traffic-related concerns. Committee would meet or does meet regularly, usually once a month, to discuss various types of traffic-related issues. And we meet to address concerns that are brought forward. And these concerns can come directly to us through the person who's doing the requesting. They can be handed down through us, through either any of the city departments, or come from council itself. So the committee also is the recommending body to the city council on traffic management, and it's a guide, and it helps guide concerns through the traffic management steps. Next, Matt's going to go over the steps involved that we use to review traffic-related concerns, and then he'll run through an example. So I'll turn it over to Matt.
All right. Thanks, David. Thank you, council. So kind of looking at the next 4 steps, as David was alluding to, the traffic management committee will oversee this kind of the 4-step process, as we call it. The 4 steps are to help go over those traffic-related concerns and help guide the traffic management committee. The first half, steps 1 and 2, are short-term. They're initially addressing the traffic-related concerns in that corridor or area of concern, and we're looking at that were observed and then enforced. Whereas the second half, steps 3 and 4, are more long-term, more looking at advanced traffic-related concerns in a corridor that are studied and engineered through a neighborhood petition process and committee process that would ultimately become possibly a public improvement project that would be recommended and provided information to council about. So we'll kind of go over the next few steps more in detail. So in step one, initial action. So as a committee, sometimes those concerns come in from different areas of the city. So the biggest thing is taking whether a concern comes into planning, operations and maintenance, or engineering, and getting that concern addressed and getting that handled over to the internal traffic management committee, and then in turn having that traffic management committee review that related concern, discuss and evaluate, and look at to take initial action, which would be step two, related to that concern at hand, to help provide what David was mentioning about that uniform response. One thing we do want to point out, though, sometimes there are isolated or events that may come up in the community where maybe a traffic-related concern maybe isn't warranted or isn't needed or fulfilled in certain situations. Depending on that, the committee would discuss and might recommend maintaining the current state with no change. In that case, the committee would inform the citizen or applicant at that time of the discussion or of what the unified response would be from all the divisions and departments. Taking a look at, we've taken a look at, the committee would receive, and then kind of taking a look at what the initial action would be. Now we're looking at educational enforcement. So taking a look at, the traffic management committee would start to set a plan in motion, involving different tactics. So an example would be if we had a traffic-related concern that was maybe speed in a corridor, we would work with the public safety department, maybe setting up maybe an increased enforcement zone, maybe setting up a speed monitoring trailer. We have some unique opportunities also outside of public safety to do possibly some educational outreach through different city platforms, both on, social media or Channel 15. If we're in an event or situation that's maybe construction or event related, there's a possibility that we could do possibly some temporary signage to help address the concern. Depending on what the concern is, there could be a wide range of traffic-related responses, and basically it would depend upon each concern, and that would be something that the committee would weigh each time that's brought forward. But the overall goal or focus would be to inform drivers and the public, about the rules and regulations and ensuring compliance, of the road and of the community. So that's kind of the quick initial action, and kind of diving into step three now would be, more of the advanced, taking a look at the long-term traffic-related concerns in a corridor, may require some additional civic input. There might be some other contributing factors outside of that we're not evaluating that we need to take a look at, and then maybe an engineering analysis. So similar to our no parking requests, we've built if a neighborhood were to gather support and input from a surrounding area, the neighborhood can partner with the traffic management committee to submit a petition, possibly for a further study and looking at public improvements. So if there was a concern at hand, maybe they would like to see something else done, the committee would work with them to establish a petition. And when we do that, we would like to taking a look at what other municipalities have done around the state and the United States as well as a whole, taking a look at trying to capture 2/3 of the affected area, the larger community that the concern might revolve around, and then also taking a look at 80% of the affected houses in that block, having the committee work with the applicant on getting the support and getting the results or the input of that neighborhood to submit. So when we would have that data brought forward, we would take a look at that with a valid petition. We would start to conduct a full engineering analysis and look to provide a recommendation from the committee to the committee and council from the engineering division, which would lead us into step 4, looking at if we have a engineering design implementation to alleviate traffic-related concerns in a corridor, the Traffic Management Committee would bring that forward to council for review, approval, and funding. In a time and place when the engineering study finds improvements is warranted, we would start looking at the design of proposed improvements. If that was warranted, we were looking at, proposed improvements would be programmed into the city's capital improvement by city council, and then it'd either be programmed for a future year or placed on unmet needs. But then once funds would be associated to that project, looking at funding the project, getting it let bid, and then approved by council for final acceptance. And then lastly, the last step would be, once that new improvement would be installed, trying to restudy, reevaluate, see the effectiveness of that with a post-study after construction. So I know that's kind of a lot, so we have a quick kind of example process, kind of what would that look like, from a citizen perspective and internally as well. So just to go over it quick, so with the step one initial action, maybe a citizen calls into the Public Works Department regarding an elevated speed in a corridor in their neighborhood. Public Works would gather that information from the citizen and notify the Traffic Management Committee. Then in turn, the Traffic Management Committee would review and evaluate that concern. And that might result in public safety, starting increased patrols within that neighborhood, with the goal to inform the drivers about, the posted speed limit in that neighborhood. Maybe the neighborhood after that's complete still feels that there's, they have the support by petition, and with the committee's help, they look to install maybe some traffic calming infrastructure to be built. After we would receive that valid petition, we would start a full engineering study. And then lastly, we would bring the findings of that report to council through the committee for a proposed project possibly, where council would have to approve and fund a project, and then we would physically let it, build it, and move forward with that. So, and then after that's all complete, we would restudy it again to study its effectiveness. One last point we just want to discuss. There are some special considerations we have to take into effect with different areas of our community. So first being with Met Transit, really need to take a look at their turning movements for their buses, taking a look at, if they needed additional visibility or additional areas for bus shelters or bus stops and crossing points for drop-offs. So taking a look at that, we'd coordinate that directly with the Met Transit staff. University of Northern Iowa, whether they have events of their own, whether it be a sporting event or event they're hosting, sometimes there's higher traffic volumes that are generated from those events. Working with them on that also during the semester, looking at, the increased street parking and also the higher pedestrian crossing volumes at intersections. Looking to address those needs, we would work with UNI staff on that. And then lastly, City of Waterloo, working with the City of Waterloo, if there's a concern or event at hand that is near the city line, looking to address both municipalities' concerns. We have different supplemental specifications between the cities, so looking to find common ground between both cities and ultimately, improve the health and safety of both communities. We would work with both engineering departments with that. So with that, David and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Let me interject real quick. So I forgot to mention, I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation. This is just information for the council to have. There's no action to be taken. It's just for your information and for your use.
Quick,
Thank you, guys, and open it up for council questions.
just a quick question. Is this kind of always operated in the background and now you've formalized it? Is that what
Yeah, correct.
amounts to? Okay. So will this be published in the city's website somewhere so that if a citizen calls in, you can say, hey, go check this out, and you can see the flow.
Yeah, I think the intention was we'd have it posted, so.
I'd like it to be that. I mean, I guess that's what I'm thinking, that it would be very helpful
Sure.
instead of re-explaining how the wheel works.
Sure, right. Yeah, we'll have the petition forms, they'll be available online, so, you know, a requester can just download them.
I guess the thing would be to have it easy to find. With the
Yeah.
keyword search that we have, some things aren't easy to find.
Right,
So,
right.
thank you.
Counselor Schultz, did you have something?
Yeah, I was looking for I had a question for Matt.
Yeah.
One slide down, Chris, if you would, or up, sorry. There's a terminology that says engineered neighborhood petition. Is there something specific about the engineered part, or is it just the petition of the neighborhood signatures?
No, it's just a petition for a neighborhood. No, there's no engineered part of it. It would just be, we want to make sure we're capturing enough individuals in that petition. That's kind of where the 2/3 and 80% come from. Just making sure we're getting enough input from that.
I guess I can provide a little more context to the study area, the map for the petitions would be, as an example, if you have a residential street complaint for elevated speed, and then we go through the process and there's tools recommended to be installed, we all have to understand that the more impedance you have on that traffic flow, it affects the adjacent streets as well, because individuals will start driving on the street beside it, affecting the neighborhood. So when they put together the map, it's usually not just the corridor in which we're discussing. It might be a block over as well, because we know those residents would be affected as well. So,
If I could ask, could you guys go a little more on the petition process? Because it sounds like, just play out the scenario. So if somebody submitted an issue, the committee reviewed it and decided, we're just going to put a few of these temporary things in place. And if it was staff's opinion, say that we don't need any additional measures, but the neighborhood still wanted it, would they have to go through the petition process themselves? Is staff helping with that process? Kind of what's that petition process look like?
Yeah, I mean, we would help out the petitioner and providing them information that's not already on like the application of all what would be involved from them that they would have to gather and then bring back to us. You know, because then that tells us that we would most likely have to move forward through those steps in the SOP to get to the next phase of what's the next action that we would take on our end to move that forward and what action needs to happen.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
So I know we've been, as a council, talking a lot about walkability, and so I think maybe it would be good to have some real-life examples. So, for example, the stop sign that was put in North Cedar on Lone Tree and Center. I know, like, that originally, they really wanted to do that to help with kids crossing the street. And so I think it was the opinion of engineering, per the traffic study, that wasn't a great place for a stop sign. But the neighbors wanted it, so they proceeded. So they didn't do a petition, right? That was just per the council, or they did? Okay. So then at that point, I think we've heard some folks calling in saying now that, they don't love the noise of the cars stopping and going. So is the stop sign considered step 4, or is that still kind of considered step 2, and engineering is going to proceed with looking at something that would be perhaps a better long-term solution, such as a roundabout?
I guess there's a lot of stuff to your question, but
No.
that specific scenario is a good example of we would still work with the neighborhood group or the resident. Even if engineering did not recommend an improvement, we'd still help them through the process and maybe present before the council that maybe it's a recommendation that engineering would not like to move forward with, but still there's a petition to support the improvement, as
Right.
the example of Center and Lone Tree. As far as the stop sign goes, that is one of the number one things in the engineering standards for not using as a speed control device.
Right.
For a lot of reasons. You named one of them, is noise. But as far as a long-term improvement after that, that is something that the engineering team can work through, yeah.
Okay, so I think, I mean, I know you said we're not doing anything, but I think that, you know, as a body, it wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of say, we would like to see traffic management consider those like better long-term solutions, but obviously those are going to affect our budget. So I think, you know, kind of like, I'm sure that putting in a stop sign, that's what the petitioner has requested. But, you know, if we can potentially offer better solutions in the long term, I think that would be preferred, especially if it encourages, you know, better walkability, it's just better for the community in general. But I understand that that's, like, we don't have the budget every time someone calls in and says, hey, we really don't like how fast people are driving through here. Okay, we'll throw in a roundabout or some sort of structure, you know.
Sure. I think maybe a better way to answer your question is every time we do pavement management plan or program any street for improvements, whether there's a petition or an issue on that corridor, we're always looking at widths of roadway, parking on each side, traffic calming elements. We see some of these roadway corridors coming in with maybe a roundabout improvement like the example you gave. Those are things we're always looking at in the background. So to say we're not looking for improvements, I would say in this specific example, when the roadway is reconstructed, we're looking for the long-term solution for that.
Sure.
I mean, that, to Chase's point, that falls back into our like complete streets
Right.
approach to design. And more to your point on kind of what step it falls into, because we did, for that particular case up in North Cedar, you know, we did study the intersection, we gathered all the data, and, you know, we looked at all the warrants, whether they were met or not. So that probably falls somewhere in step 3 of our SOP here.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Yep. If I may, I just have a few questions, if you could help me understand some discrepancies that I heard in there. I've heard is and would be both used, and then you said there's no action at this time, so I'm curious. The documents have stated this is an internal advisement document, but it seems like it's acting as a regulatory process. So I just wanted to get some clarity on that, because if the Traffic Management Committee is a formal committee from this body, it's then subject to open meetings and all that. So that's certainly not what we're doing. We're not saying we want to have this committee become the outreach arm of the council. So I just want to make sure, is it currently in effect, or is this a proposal of some sort? And if that's the case, why was it brought forward? Where does this come from?
So we brought this forward just to kind of give you the information, to help you understand sort of how we handle traffic-related concerns that we get from residents and whatnot. And, you know, we just wanted to kind of formalize the process of what we kind of currently do already. And this sort of just, you know, kind of solidifies that. It's an internal committee, just much like we have other committees internally.
Sure.
In the city for various activities.
Okay. I think there's part of me that wonders, I mean, with that stop sign on Lone Tree, you know, there was a recommendation from the staff that this is not warranted because of these metrics, and the people, we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people, decided we want one anyway. This policy, as I'm reading it on one of the pages, page 20 in the packet, says, for the fourth and final step, if an improvement is warranted, the engineered design is funded and the council has approved the design to be built. How would it ever get to us if it's not warranted by the MUTCD in this situation? Because that one came to us against recommendation and we decided we wanted one anyway. Mm-hmm. How does that happen, putting the citizens in charge, if this is the process that says it has to meet warrants before it'll come to us?
So if we get through that process and decide or determine, you know, this really isn't warranted, this isn't the right fit, you know, we have these intermediate steps before we get to that point. you know, temporary solutions, more enforcement, whatever it may be. If we get to that point where we have to do, or we do a study and find out, you know, this is not really warranted here for these reasons, we will report that back to the solicitor and say, you know, this is what we've determined. And then, you know, if they wanted to pursue the issue, that's when they would come to the council and speak to their representatives, and if they wanted to push it or pursue it further.
Okay. And just one little last piece of clarification then on the housing numbers of households. In one of them, it talked about the petitioners for an apartment complex needing to have the owner of the apartment complex be the signator. If you've got 45 units of people that are using that roadway, pedestrian sidewalk, stop signs, why does one person then negate the voice of 40 residents that live in that area? I would think living or dwelling units should be the signatures you need, not just the owner of said apartment complex. Is that something you'd have some wiggle room or readdress later?
Perhaps. I mean, we're looking at it on a per parcel basis is what we determined, but.
True enough. And if there's 100 cars using that roadway, one person silences those 100 by voting on the petition or not on the petition.
Sure. So we would take stuff like that into consideration.
Okay, please do.
And if I can carry on just with one question you asked. Excuse me. And as you were saying that, I lost my train of thought and then coughed.
Oh, perfect.
Perfect timing.
We're never the same.
It's a sweater.
The thing I wanted to check on is, because I do think you're correct that people can still always come to us. Because I think first step in that chain of events is people submit a request. I feel like just in my time here in council, most realistically, first step is going to be someone calls one of us and says, the traffic on my streets. So I think what we're kind of looking at here is agreeing as a group, informally probably, that if someone messages us about it, our first reaction would be to encourage them probably to submit a more formal petition through this process and to just go through the steps to have it reviewed. And then if they don't feel it was fulfilled through the process, then probably come back to us. And I think maybe one of your concerns is how do they know at the end of that process, if they didn't like the outcome, that they're allowed to come back to us? But is that my correct understanding? Just trying to get a read that we would kind of be encouraging citizens to follow this process first. And then if they're not happy with it, come to us. But it kind of gives us a standardized way to say, oh, okay, if you have an issue with the traffic, please submit this piece of paperwork.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's really well said. I think we've had some instances, both right before we, as a body, took office and shortly thereafter with various intersections, whether it was at Union Road or whether it was 12th and Clay, where we've had a lot of vocal feedback. I think having this process identified as a starting point, as opposed to maybe starting at steps 2, 3, or 4, would probably be a pleaser for a lot of the folks involved in this. And then just a question for Director Birdie on the public safety enforcement piece of this. I assume most likely first step in that is just putting one of your trailers out there. Would that be a fair assumption? Or is it actually putting a car out there?
Would depend what the complaint is, but if it was a speed complaint for speed calming, probably a combination of both. Probably the speed awareness trailer and doing enforcement with marked units.
And anecdotally, from conversations you and I have had about some different intersections, lots of times the enforcement that you encounter in that, it's the actual residents that are requesting the petition. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I've been here 34 years, and I would say that, yeah, many times we deal with a speed complaint about a neighborhood, and oftentimes the enforcement ends up being on the people who were the ones complaining. So.
Food for thought. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
It's interesting. I'm looking at step 4, whatever page it is. After completion of construction, the engineering division would complete studies to review effectiveness of the installed improvement. Along with that intersection that we spoke of here a little bit ago, the speed limit was lowered to 25 because of the school kids. I've had several people think that that's too low. And I don't know, was it 35 before that or 40? And they went to 25?
It was not 40.
Yeah, I think it was 30.
It was
35 on that.
35.
35. I've had people ask to reconsider that. So do they jump in the beginning of this or jump to step 4 to say how effective? And I guess, Director Birdie, do you find more tickets being issued out there where it's lowered to 25. And I mean, I drive through there when I head out to some of those businesses, and you go past the S curves and then you get in the straightaway and it's wide open and you just feel like you should be going a little faster than 25.
I think you're talking then south of Brown Bottle, right, in front of the park?
North of Brown Bottle. As you go past the S curves going north, you straighten out. You've got Pawn Shop, I want to say.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Well, that
25
is-
from
yeah.
basically Clare Street to Lone Tree.
Yeah,
Where's Leclerc? What's that by?
right by Cook's,
Okay,
where they started the curb and gutter or
okay.
the
So
swales.
I've had people specifically talk about that area. They feel that 25 is too low, would like to see it maybe 30. So I'm asking,
So you're right at a school zone. You're a block from the school zone on each end of that. That was part of the reasoning for the reduction of the speed.
I think rather than the
I'm just-
merits of that, he's just asking the process,
Right.
if they
I
would
mean,
reapply to this.
Hearing what you're saying, I appreciate that. But as an example of what to do after they changed it to 25, and people are saying that's too low for whatever reason, school isn't in session all the time. It's kids crossing at the yellow beacons, the rapid fire beacons, whatever they're called. Did we do overkill to do the beacons and lower the speed and put a stop sign in and get kind of a congested area possibly, or frustrate people, so then they drive a little more haphazard? So, I mean, Director Birdie, have you
Well,
policed that very closely to see if you got more tickets there, or do you even know?
Well, I couldn't tell you that. You know, I know that Chief Howard and his team did a lot of work out on Center Street. We probably had majority of our correspondence came through the ward councilman, you know, through Ward 1 on what's going on up there. And you know, the council giving us direction. So we've done a lot of enforcement out there, but really we don't have an opinion on whether too fast, too slow, or that's not the police. That's not our business. So
You just enforce what's there?
we
Mr. Mayor.
enforce.
Yeah, well, I'm just
Mr.
saying,
Mayor.
now we got this process.
We gotta
I'm just
stay on
curious.
the-
Not to say, so I think for the process standpoint of this, I think that would be the intent, is to make sure if we do go through the process of changing it, that we can show it went through, got the signatures, instead of an arbitrary process. And I think you're right, the process, if somebody wanted to contest that change, they would have to go through the same process, submit it, get neighborhood signatures if they
I think so.
wanted to. and-
Yeah.
That would be what would be preferred. They'd go back through the process. But to Mr. Cruz's point, that was another example of what would engineering bring forward that was not recommended, that was implemented by petition or the neighborhood group.
Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
sorry, I don't mean to cut anybody
I was
off.
just going to finish real quick, if I may.
Real quick.
I guess Mr. Rogers would probably verify this. This is a good method to have in print to protect the city in the process, so we don't do something haphazardly or just throw it out there. A regimented process of,
I am and always have been a process and procedure guy, so I applaud the effort.
yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Dunn.
I just want to say that I appreciate the education, even though I think that I knew that I kind of knew the process. I appreciate that it's in front of me. I appreciate you answering our questions. I also think to us, this is a perfect example of why we know the process, because just the conversation that we're having of what, you know, maybe folks want, or maybe what council wants, or whatever, what we go with engineering, what we go against with engineering. I think that just emphasizes the importance of knowing the process. In my life, like personally, and as a mom, and just, you know, in this position, I like consistency. So I appreciate you laying the process that's been in place, maybe not on paper, out for all of us. To the mayor's question of, you know, if I get a concern about something with traffic, you know, I obviously, you know, acknowledge to the person who sent it to me that I've received their concern, but I think, and I'm sure this is what everybody else does, I usually pass it on to staff just so they're aware, because, you know, they may be aware of stuff. Not everything comes through council. Some people do just go to city staff, not just, but go to city staff and start the process there. So I want to make sure staff is aware, because, you know, they're here 365. So anyway, I appreciate you folks putting it all out for us.
Mr. Mayor. So one last comment before we move on to our next agenda item. This wasn't just shoot from the hip activities that happened out on Center Street. It probably goes back around 6 or 7 years when from Lone Tree to Fitkin Road, it was, when I lived on Mount Vernon Road, from Lone Tree to Mount Vernon Road, it was 55 miles an hour. And then it was down to 45, and 5 or 6 years ago, it went to 35. The speed limit in front of Benton's and that was also 45, and we have parks on both sides, and there's a large stretch there that's been 35 for quite a few years. The construction that went on the last 2.5, 3 years on Center Street with the bioswales and the curbs did not change the width of the street. But I live on 12th Street, and I am very happy that the speed limit's 25. And it is probably 50% wider on 12th Street than it is Center Street. Am I close to that? Probably. It's a very narrow street. To say it is a straightaway with bioswales and curbs on each side at a street that's 3/4 the width of 12th Street is, I'm not sure where that impression comes from. The stop sign at Center and Lone Tree was not a speed reduction complete situation. It's a bike trail that people with kids on small carriers were not safely getting across that intersection.
Gil, really quick. Just because for tonight, we're just discussing the policy. I don't want to get into talking about specific areas.
That's the background, and that's where I think the citizens, as Mr. Ganfield said, this is a great process. I love processes too, but you also need to look at what makes sense at sometimes.
And I think for the process, because really we're giving some, by just consensus here, direction to staff on, we're comfortable with this, silence is acquiescence to, are we comfortable with this? Does anybody have, as you've seen, any concerns with the process? Anything direction-wise you want to give? And again, I think like anything, just having been here in the year that I have and paying attention the year before that, there's always going to be always special cases and conversations because, to Councilor Ganfield's point, at any certain point, anybody can come to this group and want to discuss the topic, but I think it's just making sure that we're comfortable with this as presented as this is hopefully the standard process we want to follow in most cases.
I guess Mr. Mayor, I think, there's no real easy way to take a counterpoint without being somewhat divisive. I think we're all aiming at the same thing here, right? Safe pedestrians, safe roadways for our visitors and our citizens alike. I don't support the idea of strengthening the bureaucracy as a principle, but I understand why we have to do it this way. I do have some concern about the time that went into this. Like, I'm just genuinely curious because I don't know what instigated this time development and the committee meeting, and then to hear, we want consistency when there's other things that can't take any more staff time. Why did this one get jumped to the top of the list? It's just a concern I have. So that's where I don't want to sit silently acquiescing. I don't want enhanced bureaucracy. I want the citizens to be our business like we claim. So that's my sentiment around it. I do think that this is an enforceable, workable project. We'll still have the citizens' voice to be able to come and be heard by us and our staff. Our staff care about our citizens. I just think, how much more time do we have to waste to go through all this process? If it were indeed time wasted, it's likely not. But that's just my sentiment about it, since you invited.
Mr. Mayor, am I wrong in thinking that we've been talking about having this presentation for at least a year or more? Am I wrong in thinking that this is the traffic?
That's correct.
Okay, I don't feel like it jumped anything, and I don't know. I don't know why that. I don't mean anything that I said to be divisive. I just meant that I appreciate the consistency. So thank you.
Yeah, and it has been something that's been discussed, but I do think it went to, at least under my understanding, some of the examples we ended up in a little bit back and forth here on is it was trying to, I think, write down the process because it was kind of, if I understand correctly, this wasn't really written anywhere previously, so we didn't really have a chance to be able to look at what are we doing, what is the process, to be able to give feedback on how we're doing it. And I think to your original question of is there action on this, or are we adopting it? I don't know if we need adoption on it, but I kind of feel that's what you're looking to, is we're kind of setting a policy that we're planning to follow, and we're not voting to adopt it, so it's kind of putting in a policy that we're not really taking action on. So I would just open any comment, any concerns, questions from any of the council members just on, are you feeling like this is something we need to vote on, have action on, or are you comfortable seeing it written as guidance? And
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I guess I said that earlier, and I asked Mr. Wiki, this was always pretty much the process anyway. I don't think you reinvented it for this presentation, and his nodding is affirmation, so that's...
I mean, inherently,
yeah, that's,
we have been doing this.
Right. So I think this is great. It's policy, it's not ordinance. Correct, Mr. Rogers? So it's a procedure. And the examples that we brought up here real quick are hitting on step 4 and putting those into practice. So,
yep.
Mr. Mayor, I don't see it as anything more than that. It's just providing clarity about the processes that the city's been following for years. And so I appreciate that, and it's important for that fact. The reality is that there are national and state standards that drive a lot of the discussion when they talk about engineering taking a look at it. And so this is a way when a neighborhood has a concern after an area has been developed, because situations can change, that the issue is brought to the city, and it goes through those processes with those standards in mind. I see it as nothing more than that, and I appreciate the fact that you wrote it down. Okay.
Good. I'm good. Any other discussion on this tonight?
I do think the other thing to keep in mind is we also have the Bike and Ped Commission. So if folks, do want to pursue further kind of, I think, again, looking to the North Cedar example, sort of a shift in the way that people use that area. Now we have more bike trails. We're encouraging people to walk. So, they would like to change kind of the long-term use of that area. I think that's also a good place to send people so that, they are also aware of that and can look into those things as well. So I think this is really highlighting that we have many resources for folks who have concerns, whether that's with people speeding or, just the way that they would like to see their community change and evolve over time. So I appreciate you guys putting this together, and I think it'll be a good tool for us.
Because I will say this helps just being able to see the process so that we can, if we ever do have a concern with the process, at least we can point to, hey, this area is a concern, let's look at changing it. Just one quick follow-up question. Do you know, is there part of this process, so let's say a petition submitted, you guys have feedback, is there a standard on, would you come and present that feedback to council? Would that just be an internal administrative position, and then it's up to the resident to then follow up and contact council if they felt they didn't like the outcome? Is there a process you had in mind for that?
Yeah, so if we get to the point where we would recommend something needing to be done or having to be done, I'm thinking about like some kind of traffic calming measure, where we'd have to physically construct something or build something. We would come to council for those types of instances where we would ask for approval from the council, approval to get funding, so we could proceed forward with like a design and bid. And then, like I said, for some of the smaller actions, like intermediate steps, whether it's temporary signage or the public safety's speed trailer, things like that, we wouldn't necessarily come to council for those types of things. Those would be things that if we got to that point and said, yeah, we recommend this, we would probably just do those kind of smaller actions.
Mr. Mayor, I think a good example of this process is item 6 on the actual council agenda this evening is Ellen Street. Ellen Street, the person came forward. I can't remember which council member, was it, and Gil referred them, Councilmember Schultz referred them to engineering. They went through the process and came back with, yeah, let's change the ordinance. So just another example of how it works.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that's good.
Can I ask, I think the same question you're asking, but I don't think I heard the answer. So if we get to a point where city staff has done their due diligence on whatever the request may be, and we maybe don't feel as a staff that there is a next step warranted, but you have a petition that's there from the citizens, what is the mechanism back from the city to give that feedback back to those citizens? And then I assume that part of that feedback then is to the citizens, hey, come and speak to this body, advocate for it on your own behalf. I just want to make sure I'm understanding where the communication is coming back from the city if we don't feel as though a next step is warranted and folks went through the time and effort to get signatures to.
So at the end of the process, no matter if it's step 1, step 3, whatever it is, if engineering has enough information from the committee that there's no improvement recommended due to these reasons, the resident will receive a formal notice from the city with all that information, with the caveat that they are able to come if they feel that they would like to speak to the city council. They could come forward with that information, and then at that point, it might generate a committee meeting.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure there was a loop closure there, so thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Any other discussion, questions, council? All right, seeing none.
Yes, a quick one, if I may.
Go ahead.
Time it. Following up with what Schrage said, many times you hear people say, with the future growth on the west part of town, you can't really incorporate that into black and white numbers yet. So you don't necessarily, or how do you incorporate Wild Horse? I don't know, 100+ homes going in there, and then traffic on 12th Street.
There's traffic manuals which generate numbers, whether it's subdivisions or commercials, which generate traffic volumes. So we can project things. Yep.
So, okay, and that's incorporated. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you putting the time into it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right, and we will now move to item number 2, Human Rights Commission Annual Report. And we have the Human Rights Commission Chair, T.W. Ingham, here to present. Thanks, T.W.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. All right. So I would like to read our narrative summary for fiscal year 2024. So I'll just read that. I'm sure you've all read it in full detail, and I want you all to feel lucky I shaved this morning. So, so fiscal year 24, July of 23 through June of 2024 was a year of growth and change for the Cedar Falls Human Rights Commission. Challenges were faced and overcome with the loss of members Kliegel, Mallon, Wright, Anigbo, Weekly, and Drusty, all of whom resigned their commissions prior to the expiration of their term. Commissioner Wiebers decided not to renew his commission at the expiration of his term, and all contributions will be greatly missed. New members, Heyman, Holding, and Waltz have been impactful additions to the commission, and their contributions will be immeasurable in the coming years. Changes in the legislature at the state level have required changes in HRC procedure and process. An impactful change in the state legislature was the passing and signing of Senate File SF 2385. This state law altered the makeup of the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, or the ICRC, and the operations therein. Rather than a consensus by non-elected and nonpartisan officials, the director or staff of director as defined in the law is appointed by the governor and given authority to approve or deny complaints filed for human rights issues across the state. Just as the HRC is an independent commission from the city of Cedar Falls and the mayor to avoid any conflicts between complaints and political influences, the HRC believes that the ICRC should be as well. The HRC believes this law will negatively impact the citizens of the city and the number of claims accepted and investigated, as the HRC does not complete its own investigations and refers all to the ICRC or other agencies per its contract with the ICRC. The Cedar Falls HRC sent a letter to the state of Iowa in opposition to this law, but was unsuccessful in preventing its passage. After passage of SF 2385, the League of Iowa Civil and Human Rights Agency, or LICRA, held a conference in Davenport to bring together human and civil rights agencies across the state. The HRC sent its executive committee, myself, Commissioner Seymour, and Bach to the event to gain invaluable information and make connections to help their mission to serve the city of Cedar Falls. At this conference, agencies including the Department of Justice, the Americans with Disabilities Association National Association, the Equal Opportunity Commission, the Food and Drug Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as speakers such as a co-author on a book on segregation in law, presented, providing knowledge and insight that will aid the HRC in its mission to promote diversity and equity for all. Discussions with federal and state agencies, as well as with other human rights commissions, provided insight on alternate paths for recourse for complainants outside of just the ICRC, should their situation call for it. Utilizing this knowledge, the HRC has filed complaints and provided resources for complainants that have been more focused on their individual situations and will hopefully yield positive results. In fiscal year 24, the HRC hosted and participated in multiple events, including our inaugural Fall Summit in 2023. This event was an incredible success in creating a community of local agencies and organizations to coordinate with Cedar Falls. The summit was focused on human rights issues and covered a range of topics, often forcing attendees to reflect on issues within their own neighborhoods and take home the lessons and knowledge gained to serve their clients. The HRC was able to take in over $600 in profit from this event and will utilize these funds to serve the city to the best of their ability. In January of 2024, a group of concerned citizens from the Cedar Valley approached the HRC requesting support of a ceasefire resolution for the conflict in Palestine. This was a matter to be brought before the city of Cedar Falls. After discussing, the HRC voiced its support for the resolution. After this matter left the consideration of the HRC, there were conflicts and issues within the community regarding the resolution and the people supporting it. The HRC made clear and continues to make clear that it supports the right to peaceful protest for any cause that furthers and supports equal human rights for all. Forgive me, I have an updated version of this with the correct budget. Forgive me. Tried to print off the newest version, and I printed off the old version. All right. So our philosophy, our commitment, our principal responsibilities have maintained the same over the last few years, and I'm not going to spend too much time going into those. What I want to do is I want to spend some time going into what we've done over the last year, or I guess fiscal year 23-24. The main thing that I wanted to talk about here, or firstly, is our annual budget. So in our general fund, which you'll see on page 9, we have 2 budget lines, which is a first for the HRC. From our general fund, through the fiscal year, we received a total of $3,720. We spent $3,692.11, with a total dollars unspent of $27.89. Through our fall summit, we received $1,335.00, spent $716.52, and we have had dollars unspent of $618.48. Those monies will be spent at our discretion for events, sponsorships, and other concerns within the city of Cedar Falls, and in coordination with other community organizations, and especially upcoming with the Waterloo Human Rights Commission, which we are working more with for joint events and within the community, because we have seen more within the area on working with them. For example, last week there was an event that we did together where we were able to come together for International Human Rights Day. That was not something that we sponsored with them, but they invited us to it, and we were able to use our funds to join that, whereas that may not have been something we would have been able to do if we didn't have some additional funds available. So that was exciting. Inquiry, concern, complaint information. Just a brief overview, the Commission no longer investigates human rights complaints as of city ordinance change in 2021. However, the HRC remains actively involved via education, advocacy, and resourcing when it comes to human rights complaints in the community. Discrimination issues are received through the advocacy committee's designated email or phone line, or through the complaint form on the HRC's webpage. The commission addressed a number of human rights concerns in fiscal year 24. The HRC resourced 2 individuals for housing complaints. We do not handle housing complaints. We resource those to the appropriate area. We had 5 individuals that were provided advocacy and educational support. We had 1 complaint against the city that decided not to file with the ICRC. We had 1 complaint who had previously filed with the ICRC, though that case had expired when they filed a new complaint with us. We had 1 complaint that occurred outside of the city of Cedar Falls, and 2 complaints occurring between 2 private parties that were not human rights complaints as defined within our guidelines. Activities and events, we participated in multiple events, as we always do, and since starting with the Human Rights Commission, our events committee has grown even stronger, and we have been more involved in the community, and we will be more involved in the community, doing more in the area, and we are extremely excited to do more. And so we're looking to do more on that. I won't go through everybody on page 10 of the commissioners through the year. You are welcome to look through that as you wish. But that is all that I have at this point. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner. Open it up to council for questions, comments.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I don't want to jump the gun on this, but I know there's an item later tonight talking a little bit about funding, I guess, reimbursements for collaboration with another entity. How will that work if we're not an investigative body? Do we do anything in those?
Yes. So what we do is we take the complaints. We determine if they are, in fact, human rights complaints. We do not do the investigations themselves as far as requesting statements or looking into or contacting the affected parties to really make determinations. What we do is we get the complaint from the person, determine where that should go. For example, within this fiscal year or next fiscal year 2025, which I apologize, it was hard to come up to write this because I'm working on these complaints as I'm working on this. We have resourced some individuals to the EEOC or the ADA rather than directly with the ICRC because we feel that that would be a better option for them. If we feel that they should go to the ICRC, we submit it to them with all of the information that we have. The ICRC will then request that that person, if they have witnesses, or will then contact the other party, the employer. If it was a city complaint, they would contact the city or the other individual. They do the investigating and determine those. We do not take that on. The city of Waterloo has an investigator, Rebecca Johnson. She does that. We do not. That was an ordinance change in 2021. We do not, again, we do not do the investigations. We take the information, submit it on their behalf, walk them through the steps, answer questions, metaphorically hold their hand. We are there for them, but we do not actually do the investigations. Thank you.
Okay. And just to add to that, just to clarify then that, so are you guys can get some reimbursement from the state based on that work?
Yes,
yep.
And that schedule will be discussed later this evening.
Mm-hmm. Any questions, comments?
I was going to say that I was looking at the staffing. I think there was on Jason Drosty. He moved to Hawaii, right?
Yes, he did.
Good for him.
And he didn't take any of us with him.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it's warmer there.
But you know what? But I love it here. So
darn right.
We've all had the opportunity to do that, but we all love it here. So.
In other words, I would just say thank you guys again for all the work that you put in. I know, especially with the number of events you've been taking on, plus the claims, plus a lot with a very small team right now. I think 6, 7.
As of December 31st, we will be at 6.
Yep.
As of now, we are 7.
Yep. And so I just thank you guys for everything you put in. And I know a lot of things that you guys take on, there are some of the more emotional things that as a community we deal with. So I just appreciate everything the team puts into it.
Yeah, and I promise next year's is going to be thicker. You will get sick of me, I promise. Good. If that is all, I thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Commissioner. And otherwise, we are adjourned then for Committee of the Whole. We'll be back here at 7 o'clock for tonight's regularly scheduled City Council meeting. Thank you, everyone.